All right, so today
Okay.
we are diving deep into something super important
Okay.
for any coder out there, especially if you've got some big coding interviews coming up. We are talking about simulated coding practice.
Hmm.
What's a pilot's best friend? It's a
Oh,
flight
well,
simulator, right? Yeah.
yes, definitely.
So for coding, we've got simulated coding practice.
That's a great analogy. And you know what's funny is
Yeah.
that so many people, they kind of skip this part of learning. They'll like read all the theory,
Right,
but then when it comes to actually applying it
right.
under pressure, that's when things kind of
Yeah.
fall apart.
It's like reading every book on swimming, but then you never actually get in the water.
Exactly.
Can you give us a real-world example of how simulated practice
Yeah, for sure.
maybe helped you out or saved the day for you?
Oh, absolutely. I can remember I was working on a project, really tight deadline, and we were integrating a new API,
Hmm.
and everything looked perfect in our test environment.
Oh no. But when we went live, errors everywhere.
Oh.
It was a nightmare. And the problem was that
Right.
our testing hadn't taken into account real-world network issues.
Huh.
And so if I hadn't spent hours beforehand, like doing
Oh.
simulated testing with like intentionally
Oh.
throttled connections, we would have been in trouble for
Yeah.
days.
So even for seasoned coders,
Oh,
you're saying things can go wrong if you're not practicing
That's
under
right.
those realistic
Oh.
conditions.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's a relief to hear.
Yeah.
Now, when we say simulated conditions in coding,
Right.
what are we talking about here? Are we
Yeah.
talking about virtual reality headsets? Are we coding in a wind tunnel?
Not quite the wind tunnel yet,
Okay.
but it's more about like intentionally recreating
Okay.
those challenges that you would face in a real project
Mm-hmm.
or a really scary coding interview.
So give us the rundown. What are some examples?
So you've got the classics like timed coding challenges.
Mm-hmm. Those really make you think fast
Yeah.
and make decisions under pressure. And then you have mock interviews. Some platforms are even using AI for these now, which we can dive into later.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can be as simple as just working on a
That's all.
collaborative project where you have to figure out code
Hmm.
that someone else has written that's full of errors.
Intentional errors.
Yeah.
So you're saying like go in
Yeah. Like purposefully.
and sabotage your own code.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm terrified, but also intrigued. But I mean, it makes sense because
Yeah.
the real world of coding is not
Yeah.
always clean and predictable.
Exactly. You wouldn't want a pilot's first experience
Right.
with turbulence to be in a real flight, would
Oh,
you?
okay, point taken. So it's like
Yeah.
you get to crash and burn,
Exactly.
but safely.
Yeah.
What about those of us who thrive
Yeah.
in a bit of chaos? Isn't there
Yeah.
some value in pushing ourselves beyond our comfort zone?
Absolutely. That element of pushing yourself is really important.
Okay,
That's where the simulated comes in.
great. Yeah.
You get to experiment,
Yeah.
try risky things,
Yeah.
and learn from those failures,
Right.
but in a controlled space. So it's about finding that balance between like deliberate practice and calculated risk.
I like that. So
Yeah.
the what is becoming clear, but what about the why?
Okay.
Like, why should we care about
Yeah, good question.
simulated practice? I mean, besides those coding interviews,
Right.
what are the actual benefits?
So the blog post you shared
Yeah.
highlights some big ones, problem solving,
Right.
time management, and confidence. And what's really cool is
Yeah.
these are things that will help you not just in those first job interviews,
Right.
but throughout your entire coding career.
So it's not just a stepping stone. It's something that stays with you.
Yes,
All right, so let's break these down a little more. Problem solving is like the core of coding, right?
for sure.
How does simulated practice help with that?
So imagine you're in a mock interview. You get a problem you've never seen before.
Uh,
The clock is ticking, and you can feel the interviewer staring at you.
Yeah.
That's when you have to think on your feet,
Mm.
break the problem down, and come up with a solution,
Okay.
all while you're under pressure. And that's what simulated practice does. It's like training your brain to be a
Yeah.
super agile problem-solving machine.
So no matter what challenge comes up,
Yeah.
you're ready to tackle it.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm starting to get it.
Good.
It's not just about memorizing.
Yeah.
It's about building those skills
Right.
that make you adaptable. Now, on to time management.
Mhm.
I have a confession.
Uh-huh.
I used to pull
Uh-huh.
all-nighters in college to get my coding assignments done.
Yeah, we've all been there.
Not my proudest moments,
Yeah.
but deadlines are deadlines.
For sure.
How does simulated practice help with that?
So all-nighters, they're like a rite of passage.
Yeah.
But let's try to avoid that.
Okay.
Simulated practice, especially those timed challenges,
Okay.
that make you prioritize and really make the most of every minute. It's like boot camp for your time management skills.
So it's less about coding as fast as possible
Yeah,
and more about strategy and execution.
exactly. You start to get a feel for how long things will actually take,
Mm.
which is so helpful when you're like estimating how long a project is going to take.
Okay, so instead of just panicking and trying to write
Or-
code as fast as possible,
Yeah.
you take a step back.
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense.
Mm.
All right, now let's talk about confidence, which
Oh.
can be tough,
Definitely.
but is so important. The blog post mentioned that
Mm.
practicing under pressure actually makes you more confident.
It's true.
I think we've all had those moments where
Mhm.
we're like, can I actually do this?
Yeah.
How does simulated practice help with that?
It's all about building that belief in yourself that you can actually succeed.
Hmm.
Think about it. When you practice under pressure, you're showing yourself
Mm.
that you can handle those tough problems. And each time you do that,
Yeah.
it's like a boost to your confidence.
So the more you practice,
Yeah.
the more you see yourself succeed,
Exactly.
the more confident you become.
Precisely.
I like that. It's like a positive feedback loop.
Yeah.
It's like that feeling when you finally land
Yes.
the hard skateboarding trick.
I get it.
Okay, so the blog post talked about
Yeah.
Outgo Academy as a platform
Right.
that uses these conditions.
They do.
They have some really cool features.
Yeah, they do.
What really stood out to you?
So the AI-powered mock interviews are definitely pretty innovative.
Yeah.
The fact that the AI actually adjusts to your skill level,
Oh, wow.
that's pretty amazing.
That's incredible. Now, let's be real. Not everyone has access to a platform like that.
Sure.
What about people who are maybe
Yeah.
learning on a budget or prefer open source resources?
You can absolutely still benefit from simulated practice.
Okay.
The principles are the same no matter what.
Okay.
You can create your own timed coding challenges using websites like LeetCode or HackerRank.
Okay.
And for mock interviews, there are so many resources online.
Mm.
You can find lists of common interview questions,
Right.
and there are even coding communities where you can practice with other people.
So it's not really about the specific
Yeah,
platform. It's about the approach.
exactly.
Like you can get a great workout
Yeah,
at a fancy gym or in your living room.
it's true.
It's about putting in the effort and having a plan.
Yes, being deliberate about it.
Okay.
Setting goals.
Okay, so let's get into some of those techniques.
Sure.
The blog post mentions setting realistic time limits.
Yeah.
I mean, how do we find that
Yeah, that's a good question.
sweet spot between pushing ourselves
Right.
but not getting completely overwhelmed?
It's tempting to just go for those really tight time limits,
Yeah,
but honestly, that can backfire. It can lead to frustration.
right.
You might even burn out.
It's like trying to run a marathon without any training.
Exactly.
You might make it a mile, but then you're done.
Yeah, exactly. A better way is to start with more generous time limits, maybe even
Well-
double or triple what you think you need at first.
Hmm.
This lets you really focus on understanding the problem,
Okay,
explore different ways to solve it
right.
and get those basics down.
So you're building a solid foundation
Exactly.
before adding the pressure.
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense.
Good.
It's like learning an instrument.
Good, exactly.
You start slowly, deliberately,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can speed things up later.
Right.
Okay, let's talk about whiteboarding, which
Oh, the whiteboard.
I have to say, I'm always a little nervous about coding on a whiteboard.
That can be intimidating.
It feels so permanent.
Hmm.
Is there a way to get
Yeah, absolutely.
practice this without feeling like
Uh,
it's a high-stakes exam?
And the cool thing is,
Yeah.
whiteboarding is helpful for more than just those interviews. It can help with your problem solving and communication skills
Oh, tell me more.
in general.
Okay.
So when you have to write code on a whiteboard, you can't rely on things
Mm.
like syntax highlighting.
Mm-hmm.
You really have to think through the logic of your code.
Okay.
It's like coding in its purest form.
Wow.
And it's a great way to practice explaining your thought process as you go.
So if you don't have a whiteboard,
Yeah.
what are some other options?
Well, you can use a big notepad
Okay.
or even just a blank wall and a marker.
Right.
There are also some digital whiteboarding tools online that
Okay.
can be really helpful.
So it's about simulating
Yeah.
that constraint.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about explaining your thought process out loud.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't coding kind of a solitary activity?
It can be, but
Yeah. What's interesting is that
Yeah.
saying your thoughts out loud can help you understand the code better and even catch errors you might miss otherwise.
talk me through this. Am I talking to my rubber ducky?
You got it.
Okay.
So when you have to explain something, you
Yeah.
have to make sure it makes sense,
Right.
even to a rubber duck.
So it's like a code reviewer is in my
So-
head.
Yes.
I like it. Now, the blog post also talked about
Yeah.
focusing your practice on specific types of problems.
It's about knowing your enemy.
Right, because there are certain problems and concepts that
Yeah.
come up a lot in interviews and in real-world coding.
Yeah.
They even gave a whole list of categories.
They did.
Like arrays, strings, linked lists, trees, graphs.
All the good stuff.
It's like studying for a test.
Yeah.
They focus on the key chapters.
Exactly.
Okay, let's pick one category to
Oh.
dive into.
Sounds good.
The blog post mentioned
The two-sum problem.
a classic.
Can you break that down and explain why it's good to practice?
So the two-sum problem, it sounds simple at first.
Okay.
You're given a list of numbers, and you need to find two numbers in that list that add up to a specific target number.
Okay.
It's a classic problem that tests your understanding of how to work with arrays.
So it sounds straightforward.
Yeah.
But it's actually tricky.
There are actually a few ways to solve it,
Okay.
each with its own, pros and cons. You could just check every possible pair,
Yeah.
but that's not very efficient.
Right.
Or you could use something called a hash table.
Oh, so it's not just about finding a solution.
Right.
It's about finding the most efficient one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's important in the real world where speed really matters.
Like mastering that basic chord progression.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you can play a bunch of songs. Okay, now let's talk about something that's changing the game
Oh, yeah.
for coding practice, AI. So the blog post talked about how platforms like Algocademy are using AI
We've
to personalize problems, give feedback in real time, and even simulate different interview styles.
That's right.
Are we headed toward a future
That's the question.
where robots are teaching us to code?
Well, the robots aren't in charge yet,
Okay.
but AI is definitely changing things when it comes to learning and
Yeah.
practice.
The idea of having an AI coding tutor
I know, right?
that can figure out my weaknesses and give me instant feedback is kind of mind-blowing.
It's pretty cool.
So what are some of the benefits?
Okay, so for starters, personalized problem selection is huge. Instead of randomly choosing problems, the AI can look at your past performance, see where you're strong and weak,
Yeah.
and then choose problems that will really help you grow.
So it's like a custom training program
Exactly.
and real-time feedback.
Yeah, that's huge too.
That's got to be game-changing.
No more waiting for someone to review your code. You get instant insights, suggestions, even explanations that fit how you learn best.
It's like having a coding sensei.
Precisely.
And then there's the AI simulating
Oh, yeah, that's interesting.
different interview styles.
Yeah.
I mean, as you said earlier,
Yeah,
every interviewer's is different.
they are. Some are super technical,
Yeah.
some focus on how you communicate,
Right.
and some, they like to throw curveballs.
Oh, yeah, I know those
I
curveball
know.
interviewers.
And that's where the AI can be really helpful.
Okay.
It can imitate those different styles so you're ready for anything.
So it's like a virtual
Yeah.
sparring partner.
Yes,
But I think it's important to remember
definitely.
that even with AI,
Mm,
it's still a tool.
yes.
It's not a replacement
It's no
for
camera.
understanding why
Absolutely.
things work.
You still need
Right.
that human element.
Mm.
It's like a GPS can get you to your destination,
Yeah.
but you still need to know how to drive.
Exactly.
Okay, now, the blog post does say
Yeah.
that simulated coding practice isn't always easy.
It's valid.
There are challenges.
Right.
Let's talk about some of those.
Okay.
One that gets me is performance anxiety.
Oh, yeah. We've all been there.
I mean, we all want to do well
Of course.
in those coding interviews,
Mhm.
but the nerves can be a lot.
They can.
I remember one interview where my hands were actually shaking.
Oh, no.
It's like, I know I can code,
Right.
but then you're in that situation and your brain just goes blank.
It happens.
Any advice for dealing?
So first, it's important to know that it's totally normal to feel nervous.
Okay.
Like, don't try to fight it.
Okay.
A little bit of nervous energy can actually be a good thing. It can help you focus.
Right.
The key is to make sure it doesn't turn into full-blown panic.
Yeah. There are some things you can do.
Yeah?
Deep breathing exercises can help. They can really calm your nerves. Another thing is visualization.
Okay.
Spend a few minutes before the interview and just imagine yourself going through it,
Yeah.
answering the questions,
Right.
doing a great job.
Okay, so it's like mental rehearsal.
Exactly.
And, of course, preparation
Yeah, for sure.
is the key.
The more you practice, the more comfortable you'll feel.
Okay, so deep breathing, visualization, and practice.
That's a trifecta.
What about when you hit a plateau?
The plateau.
You're working hard, but
Yeah.
you're not seeing results.
It happens. It's like climbing a mountain. Sometimes you
Yeah.
have to walk on a flat part for a bit before
Yeah.
you can reach the next peak.
How do we break through?
So the first step is to really pay attention to
Okay.
how you're doing. Are you solving problems at a certain level?
Right.
Are you running into the same problems over and over? Once you figure out the patterns, then you can try different things.
So it's like being a detective.
Yeah.
Okay, I can do that.
Maybe you need to try different types of problems to
Yeah.
broaden your skills. Or
Yeah.
maybe you need to get some feedback from someone else.
Okay.
Talk to a mentor.
Right.
Join a coding community.
Hmm.
Sometimes a fresh perspective can really help.
It's like having a coding buddy.
Oh,
Now let's talk about discouragement, because I think it's real.
it is.
What's the point if I
Right.
keep hitting these roadblocks?
Yeah, discouragement is tough.
How do we stay motivated?
So think of those setbacks as opportunities to learn.
Hmm.
Every challenge, every error, every line of code,
Yep.
it all makes you a better coder.
Okay.
So focus on the journey.
Right.
Don't forget to celebrate the small wins. Did you finally solve that problem that was driving you crazy?
Right.
That's a win.
Okay, so focus on the journey.
Yeah,
Celebrate the small wins.
it's exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about the benefits, the challenges,
Right.
the strategies for success.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we actually measure our progress?
That's a good question.
Like, how do we know
Yeah.
if we're actually getting better?
So it's important to choose ways to measure your progress
Okay.
that line up with your goals. Are you focusing on speed, accuracy?
Right. There are so many options.
Yeah.
For me, I think
Yeah.
problem-solving speed
Okay.
is important, especially for timed challenges.
It is.
It's like, how quickly can I figure things out?
Exactly. And that's something you can easily track.
Okay.
Another important metric is your success rate.
Mm,
How often are you actually solving the problems correctly?
right. It's not just about going fast. It's about
Yeah.
getting it right.
Exactly. And as you get better, you can start
Mm.
trying harder problems.
Okay, so speed, accuracy, complexity.
Mm-hmm.
What about code quality?
Oh, yeah, that's crucial.
I mean, writing clean, efficient code,
Definitely.
that's the goal, right?
Absolutely. Especially when you're working on real projects with
Yeah.
other people.
Right, because no one wants to be the person with the messy, unreadable code.
Exactly. And luckily, there are tools that can help with this.
Mhm.
Linters, static analysis tools, they can
Okay.
find problems and suggest improvements.
So they're like a virtual code editor that's
Yeah.
constantly helping you improve.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay, we've covered a lot today.
We have.
We talked about
Mm.
why simulated coding practice matters,
Yes.
the challenges, the strategies.
It's been great.
Before we go, I want to leave you with something to think about.
Okay.
We talked about all these existing platforms and techniques,
Yeah.
but if you could design your own
Bro.
perfect simulated coding environment,
Mm-hmm.
what would it look like?
Ooh, that's a good one.
What features would it have?
I'm curious to hear what people come up with.
Right. Let us know in the comments.
Yes, please.
Until next time, happy coding.
Happy coding. It's about understanding that simulated practice can be tough, you know?
Yeah, it's not always easy.
No, it's not a magic solution.
Right.
It's about putting in the work.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the specific challenges that come up.
Okay.
The blog post talked about performance anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
which, as we just discussed,
Right.
is a very real thing.
It is. I remember one interview.
Yeah.
I was so nervous I could barely think straight.
Mm.
It's like your body goes into this
Right.
fight or flight mode
Yeah.
and your brain just shuts down.
What are some ways to manage that anxiety?
So the first thing is to just acknowledge it.
Okay.
Don't try to pretend you're not nervous.
Hmm.
In fact, a little bit of nervousness can actually be helpful.
Right.
It can keep you sharp,
Okay.
but you don't want it to take over.
Right, right.
Mm.
So how do we keep it from spiraling out of control?
So there are a few things you can try.
Mm-hmm.
Deep breathing exercises are great.
Okay.
They can help slow down your heart rate and calm you down.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Another thing is visualization.
Mm-hmm.
Before the interview, just take a few minutes
Okay.
and imagine yourself in the room answering the questions, feeling confident.
So like a mental rehearsal.
Exactly. And, of course, practice makes a big difference.
Yeah.
The more you practice, the more familiar the problems become,
Hmm.
and the less scary it all feels.
It's like that saying, practice makes perfect, or at least practice makes less terrifying.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got deep breathing, visualization, and practice.
Where's the big ones?
What about when you're putting in the work,
Right.
but you're not seeing improvement?
Ah, yes, the plateau.
The dreaded plateau. It can be so frustrating.
It can. It's like you're stuck in a rut.
Yeah, exactly. How do we break free?
Well, the first thing is to recognize that it's happening. Are you consistently solving problems at a certain difficulty level, but struggling to move up?
Okay.
Are you making the same mistakes over and over again?
Right.
Once you figure out the patterns, you can adjust your approach.
So it's about being aware of what's going on and then
Yeah.
figuring out what to change.
Exactly. Maybe you need to try different types of problems, or maybe you need to get some feedback from someone else. A fresh perspective can be really helpful.
Like a different set of eyes. Okay, and then there's the discouragement that can come with all of this.
That's a tough one.
It's like, what's the point of all this if I'm just going to keep getting stuck?
It's easy to lose motivation
Right.
when you feel like you're not making progress.
How do we stay motivated when the going gets tough?
Well, I think it's important to remember that setbacks are a part of the learning process.
Okay.
Everyone makes mistakes. The key is to learn from those mistakes and keep moving forward.
So don't give up.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it.
Right.
And remember to celebrate the small wins. Every time you solve a problem, every time you learn something new, those are victories.
Okay, so focus on the journey.
Yeah.
Celebrate the small wins.
Exactly. And remember, coding is a skill.
Right.
And like any skill, it takes time and effort to master.
Okay, we've talked about the benefits of simulated coding practice, the challenges, the strategies.
It's been quite a discussion.
But how do we actually know
Yeah, that's an important question.
if we're making progress?
It is. It's easy to get caught up
Right?
in the day-to-day practice and lose sight of the bigger picture.
Besides feeling more confident, how do we actually track our improvement?
Well, the key is to choose metrics that align with your goals.
Okay.
Are you focusing on speed, accuracy, code quality?
Right. So many things to focus on. I think for me, problem-solving speed is a big one, especially with those timed coding challenges.
That makes sense.
It's like, how quickly can I figure things out?
Right. And that's something you can easily track.
Okay.
You can time yourself on practice problems and see if you're getting faster.
Okay, so track my time.
Another important metric is your success rate. How often are you actually solving the problems correctly?
Right, so it's not just about speed, it's about
Exactly.
getting it right.
You want to make sure you're not just rushing through and making careless mistakes.
Right. And as you get better, you can try more
so-
complex problems.
So you're constantly challenging yourself.
Okay, so speed, accuracy, complexity. What about code quality? I mean, writing clean, efficient code.
Oh, that's huge. Especially when you're working on real-world projects where other people will be reading your code.
Right, because nobody wants to be that person with the messy code.
Exactly. And luckily, there are tools that can help you write better code. Linters and static analysis tools can point out potential problems and suggest improvements.
So it's like having a code quality coach built into your editor.
That's a good way to think about it. And if you're doing mock interviews, pay attention to the feedback you're getting. Are people praising your code for being clean and well-organized?
Okay.
Or are they suggesting areas for improvement?
Right, because sometimes we need that outside perspective.
We do. Sometimes we're too close to our own code to see the flaws.
All right, well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
Yeah, we've talked about why simulated coding practice is important, the challenges you might face, and some strategies for success.
It's been a great conversation.
It has. But before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with a question.
Okay, I like this. Hit us with it.
We've talked about all these existing platforms and techniques, but if you could design your own perfect,
interesting
simulated coding environment, what would it look like?
Yeah, what would your dream coding dojo be like?
Exactly. What features would it have? What kind of challenges would it offer?
That's a great question. Let us know in the comments what you come up with.
I'm really curious to hear what people think.
All right, until next time, happy coding.
Happy coding. Yeah, it's about creating a safe space to fail.
Right.
So you can learn and grow.
Okay, so it's not about avoiding failure. It's about embracing it in a controlled environment.
Yeah. It's like, you know, in a flight simulator, you can crash 1,000 times. It's no big deal.
Okay, so we've talked about performance anxiety and hitting those plateaus.
Right.
But what about just the overall feeling of discouragement?
Yeah, that can be a tough one.
It's like, what's the point of all this if I'm just going to keep struggling?
Yeah, it's easy to get discouraged
Yeah.
when you feel like you're not making progress.
How do we stay motivated when things get tough?
Well, I think it's important to remember that coding is a journey, not a destination. Right?
There's always something new to learn,
Right.
and there will always be challenges along the way.
Yeah, that's true.
The key is to focus on the process and enjoy the ride.
Okay, so focus on the journey, not just the destination.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And celebrate the small wins along the way.
Yeah, those little victories can make a big difference.
You really can.
All right, so we've talked a lot about the benefits of simulated coding practice, the challenges, and the strategies for success.
It's been a good conversation.
It has. But before we go, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought.
Okay, hit me with it.
We've talked about existing platforms and all these techniques, but if you could design
Interesting.
the perfect simulated coding environment for yourself, what would it look like?
That's a great question.
What features would it have?
Yeah, what would your dream coding dojo be like?
Exactly. Let us know in the comments
Yeah, tell us.
what you come up with.
I can't wait to see what people say. And until next time, happy coding.
Happy coding.